Aloha aina, ano ai, velina kako. Welcome to Free Hawaii News, brought to you by the Koani Foundation, presenting Hawaiian perspectives on a broad range of topics and issues affecting the Hawaiian Islands, the Pacific, and the world. Your hosts for Free Hawaii News are Leon Kaulahau-Siu, musician, composer, diplomat, and political analyst, and Hinaleimoana Wong, Kumu filmmaker, cultural and Hawaiian language preservationist, and community leader. And now, Free Hawaii News.
Ano ai me ke aloha ia kākoa pauloa ko Hawaii nei pai ai nā puni. Mahalo ke kipa ana mai ia mao ma Free Hawaii News. O wau no ke ia o Kumuhina.
Aloha, my name is Leon Kaulahau-Siu, and we welcome you to this episode of Free Hawaii News. Recently, freshman Hawaii State Senator Samantha DeCourt, who represents the west side of Oahu from Ko'olina to Makua, delivered a short speech in the Hawaii State Senate that got a lot of people's attention, both from her fellow senators and from the public at large. In fact, her speech went viral on many social media sites. This was a stirring speech by a Hawaiian, to Hawaiians, and about Hawaiians. We'd like to take a minute and play her speech for you right now.
I want to start with a passage from the diaries of Queen Liliuokalani, where in it she's quoted saying these words: "I declare such treaty to be an act of wrong towards the native and part native people of Hawaii." See, back in 1897, our Queen went to the U.S. Congress in Washington, D.C. to oppose the annexation of Hawaii. She describes the injustices at the time as, quote, "an invasion of the rights of the ruling chiefs, the perpetuation of the fraud whereby the constitutional government was overthrown, and finally, an act of gross injustice to me," end quote. What the Queen said 128 years ago still stands today, except this time we are faced with a mentality shaped by westernized ways that has made us comfortable, complacent, and disconnected from the roots that once made us strong. Our ancestors fought with resilience, unity, and the unwavering belief that our sovereignty was worth fighting for. Today, the battle is no longer just about land. It's about identity, it's about culture, it's about language, and it's about the right to exist as we are without compromise. We cannot be sovereign in our lands if we are not sovereign in our thinking. We cannot allow the comfort of conformity to be our downfall. This is our time to reclaim, to restore, and to rise. We are armed with knowledge, with voices that refuse to be silenced, and with passion for justice. Let this be the year that we awaken as Kanaka. Let this be the year we hui together and resist. Let this be the year that we begin to take back what was never theirs to take. E ho'o Kanaka, e ku I kapono, e ku e I kaheva. Stand as warriors, rooted in righteousness and resistance, for the battle is far from over, and the survival of our people is worth fighting for.
It gives us great pleasure to have Hawaii State Senator Samantha DeCourt join us here in the studio today. Aloha, congratulations on such a great speech. And it was so compact, and it just really hit. What caused you to think about making this speech?
Yeah, I'm Kanaka Maui, and it's so important for us whenever we have an opportunity in our platform to use our platform to promote our messages. And so, having just been elected to the State Senate, District 22, representing from Ko'olina all the way to Makua, and my district being the largest Native Hawaiian homestead population in the state, I felt
In
it
the world,
necessary in the world, actually, yeah. And I felt it necessary to be the best representation of my community by just promoting the Queen and how she continued to fight for us and how we're still fighting today. It was really our monarchy that continues to just be the inspiration for my passionate pursuit behind our Indigenous community to promote our message, but then also to share with the world what's been happening here in Hawaii. We're in a situation in modern day times where we're dealing with a westernized mentality. My vision is to see our lahui take every position of leadership here in Hawaii. We should feel comfortable to be able to promote our message regardless of opposition on the other side. And if there's anything that I can say about Kanaka is we're very resilient. So we're not going to just take no for an answer. We're going to find another way. We're going to find another way, and we're just going to keep going. We're not going to stop. People want a reason to come back home. And if they can find a reason, they'll make a way to be here. People feel compelled to be back home to fulfill kuleana, and they're not concerned about having to have this extravagant home or, live beyond their means. We're very simple people, and it's important that we bring those people back home so we can continue to fulfill our mission here. Department of Hawaiian Homelands is our only opportunity to keep Kanaka here. If they could afford to live here, they would. DHHL lands is the best way that we can do that. And so the reason that I had ran for the Senate is because it's the Senate that keeps the department heads accountable. So I therefore would be able to work with DHHL to keep them accountable to make sure, hey, your job is to take waitlisters off of the waitlist and get them into their home. Are you doing that or are you not? And so that for me is my priority and what I see to be a very practical way that we can keep our people here. Because if they can afford to live here, they're going to want to stay here. They want to raise their families here. They want to see their generations grow here. And to me, that would be the best solution, is to fight for that. So I'm making that my mission. People are struggling right now. I mean, my household, we're living paycheck to paycheck. So when I see misappropriations or when I see misspending from departments, I definitely call them out on that, because that's our hard-working money that you're frivolously spending, and I don't believe that necessarily has to be taking place in that way.
There have been comments on social media of late by people saying that only a small handful of houses are being rebuilt in Lahaina after the devastating fires of August 2023. Others have commented that construction permits and red tape are holding residents up from starting construction. Naturally, we here at Free Hawaii News are curious as to how true that actually is. In order to get the answers to those questions, we go now to Lahaina, where Lahaina resident and fire survivor Mikey Burke and my classmate, Kamehameha, class of 1990, Daniel Palakiko, are standing by. Mikey Burke is the president of the Lahaina Community Land Trust. Daniel Palakiko is with the Maui Construction Industry Coalition. Aloha mai kaua, Mikey. Aloha mai, Danny. Aloha mai.
Aloha Hina, mahalo for visiting us here in Lahaina.
Aloha tita.
Where are you right now?
We are standing on Komomai Street, which happens to be the neighborhood that I live in, but also it was the first neighborhood that the County of Maui opened up for rebuilding.
Mikey, you and your husband lost your house in the Lahaina fire, yes?
Yes, we did. We moved here to Komomai Street in 2017, so it was a fairly new neighborhood when August 8th occurred. Our lot is just over here beyond the screen, but we had a 4-bedroom home. We were raising 4 boys, 4 dogs, a rabbit, a tortoise, and 2 guinea pigs here in this home.
Danny, what about you?
Well, as for myself, I'm
I've been living up in Kaula Valley on our Kuleana land. So on August 8th, we were witnessing and watching the ahi as it burned through our town as spectators. So we didn't lose our home. But we know so many family members, all of Lahaina is one big ohana. And so with every home that fell, we knew whose homes they were. And so we grieved with them.
It looks like there are new homes starting to go up in your neighborhood there, right?
We had some homes survive the fire. We had actually 4 homes at the top survive the fire. But as soon as this was available to start rebuilding, a lot of our neighbors were ready to go. Actually, at the Makai side of the neighborhood was the Ohana Ahi. They were the first ones to be able to build their home and occupy their home, which they did right before Thanksgiving of last year. We were lucky in this neighborhood. You know, this was a brand new neighborhood. Everything was up to code. We are not in an SMA area. We had utilities that were already underground. We have sidewalks and streets that are wide enough for emergency personnel. So really, once the debris was gone in this neighborhood, there wasn't anything else that we had to overcome to be able to build here. It's thriving.
Danny, you're with the Maui Construction Industry Coalition. Could you please give us an overview of how new home construction is coming along in the burn zone now?
The construction, as of the present time, we're seeing that starting to ramp up. For a long time, we were trying to get a more accurate estimate as to the number of residential homes alone that were lost and properties that were lost in the fire. And we finally got that narrowed down to just under 1,700 via 4Leaf's information. At the present time, I think the last number I heard last month, we had well surpassed 100 permits in, some already out, and moving up on 200. So if you look at 200 permits, either in application or already out and being constructed, that's just a little bit over 10% of the total number of homes that we got to build.
Are residents able to construct new homes similar to what they had before?
Yeah, actually, they could. We're looking at homes right now, and it's kind of unbelievable to see. I'm looking down the street on my own neighborhood, and these homes look exactly like they did on August 8th. It's beautiful to see, but also a stark reminder of where we're at. For myself, on the lot that we have here, we had a beautiful 4-bedroom home that was brand new, but it wasn't a home that we could age in. And so the thought for my husband and I was that we could definitely get the plans that we had and start really quickly, or we could be a little bit more methodical and try to build a home that we could age in place, right? So we decided to do it that way. We're not building the home that we had. We're building something that is going to have ADA widths on bathrooms and bedrooms on the first floor, so that we can raise our entire ohana in the whole house. And then when we need to, when the timing is right, my husband and I, you know, when he can no longer climb up the stairs, my husband and I can move downstairs, and our children can live upstairs, or you know, one of the children can live upstairs. So to answer your question, people can build back what they had. But that's not always going to be the case. Maybe something that they had is no longer compliant, or it doesn't fit their needs anymore. Maybe they started out as a young family, and 30 years later, they're a multi-generational household. And so while they could build back what they had, it might be better that they build back for what is needed now.
Tell us about the permitting process. How long is it taking?
On average, I'm thinking, if I had to guess, I'm thinking it's still taking us a couple of months just to get a permit out. Between all of that, between having to coordinate between the time difference of the West Coast and ourselves, and all the different concepts that are involved in that. So it's been kind of daunting, but it's slowly finding its way to where the gears are starting to get greased, and we're starting to see things move.
Some homes are going up way faster than others. Why is that?
We're at different levels of, I think, grief in this process. and acceptance maybe for some came much quicker than others. I can speak to myself. I have a cleared lot that has been cleared for a long time now. But once I commit myself to figuring out how to rebuild, it becomes real. And I say that in the sense of right now, in my head, I know I'm going to rebuild. And I'm okay with that thought. But once I have the plans in my hand and I put that to paper with my insurance proceeds and maybe my SBA loan, then it becomes a reality of, am I actually able to rebuild? And for myself, it's too overwhelming. So I chose to put myself into the community and help the community figure out how to rebuild and not have to deal with my own rebuild. So I don't think I'm alone in that. And other people processed this grief and this trauma very differently. They went from day one, they dug right into figuring out how they were going to rebuild.
How successful have fire survivors been in keeping Lahaina for Lahaina residents instead of foreign developers and disaster capitalists?
I think that the Lahaina community has been really successful so far at stopping the influx of these foreign investors, these disaster capitalists coming in to take advantage. You know, when the fire happened, these people who have money had a war map out and they knew exactly the plan that they needed to be able to come in. And thank goodness for community leaders who stepped up right away to try and come up with a plan to protect Lahaina. One of them being the land trust, others just putting the kahea out that we need every single face in Lahaina to be the face that it was on August 8th. And what that also looks like is checking in on your neighbors, seeing if they have plans to rebuild, giving them hope, you know, by if you were further along in your healing to be able to build, you went ahead and did that, and it showed your neighbors that we can do this. This is not outside of the realm of possibility. We can all come back. It's the protection is shown in the way that our local contractors are showing up to help, to sacrifice maybe the advancement of their own ohana in order to make sure that they're bringing Lahaina's ohana along. However, I do want to caution that we are at a crossroads right now. Families are getting to the tail end of maybe their fight with the insurance. They are figuring out whether they are approved for SBA loans or not. They're seeing what other financial grant opportunities are available, what sort of labor opportunities are available, and they're going to have to sit and make a hard decision. Can they actually rebuild, or do they have to move on? And so there might come a point very soon where, you know, we were seeing maybe one or two families that were facing this question and needing to be able to talk it out with someone. And very soon it might be 10 or 15 families at a time. And so the community, the agencies that are trying to keep Lahaina home, we've been trying to build our arsenal, trying to go out to funders, to donors who have the heart to want to help Lahaina, to say that this is the next kind of disaster on the horizon, and we need to be able to be ready for it. We cannot react to it. We need to be prepared now, because these are going to be heavy conversations and these are going to be life-changing decisions, life-changing for that ohana, but for our entire community and the fabric that it is.
What kind of place you would like Lahaina to be in the future once the rebuilding is finished?
We want Lahaina to be open to the local community, not just the Lahaina community, but the entire Maui community. And we want this to be a safe place for us to raise our children and our grandchildren and not feel like second-class citizens in our own home. We're done with that already. We want to be the heartbeat of Lahaina town and the visitor industry, the tourism that happens, the visiting that comes, that is secondary to us. That is the dessert, but we are the main course. I want the people in Lahaina to understand that you have kuleana. To be of Lahaina, you have kuleana. This is not a destination anymore. This is a way of life. And every single one of us who claims West Maui as home needs to fulfill kuleana. Not just the, handful of advocates here and there that step up to every single cause, because there are so many things that we have to protect against in this town, and that's not going to go away when Lahaina is done rebuilding. We are going to need the community to step up and fulfill kuleana, and protect this place for the next 40 generations.
What I envision for Lahaina is pono, a balance between our Kanaka Maoli being able to be recognized for their Aboriginal rights, being able to claim their mo'okua how back to this aina ki one anau rako, and for other ethnicities that have invested their everything to move here during the plantation era and set up their own clans so that they're now 5, 6, 7 generations deep. That's still part of Lahaina. That's still part of Maui. And if you start to lose sight of that, then you really don't understand the inherent importance of the local aspect of community. That cannot be bread. That's something that you got to live because you invested cocoa into this, and you invested mana into this, and you invested your kino and your parents' kino and your grandparents' kino, and they went work in the plantation fields until they were 75 at such ridiculous low wages so they can start something new. And they moved out of the Philippines, and they moved out of China, and they moved out of Japan and Portugal and wherever else they came from. This is the investment that we want for Lahaina. Those long-standing histories should be the foundation of what Lahaina is. And so if you coming in to live in Lahaina, we can talk story. We're not going to just close the door and say you cannot come in, but understand what you're stepping into and what you got to be prepared to both commit to, and what you also got to be prepared to compromise maybe from what you think life should be for you. Because you're moving to Lahaina, we're not moving to Texas. And so that's the important thing for me, what Lahaina should always have been and what it should be and what should always be for every generation that follows us, is that they know when they stand here, this is my Lahaina. Because we go back so many generations. Because my kupuna and my kupuna before them, they made this my Lahaina. And so I'm hoping that this is what we, in our voice, as we talk about these things and as we fight about our rights and as we try to set ourselves on a new course, this is what I really pray happens, is that we won't feel like second-class citizens. We're going to feel what we should have felt all along, that this is our place. You coming to visit us. Mai kai, come. Komo mai. And then when you bow, ha'alele. I really hope that that's the Lahaina I get to live to see.
We come now to a segment that's one of my favorites, and it's called the Pacific Way. And in the Pacific Way, Kumu Hina and I discuss about an island perspective, not just how we view things, but how we do things as well. And then what we find, of course, is that we're very much connected to the rest of the Pacific, a family, like a big family. And so today, we're going to be talking about those things. There's more to the discussion than just simply talking about culture and all that. We need to engage with the rest of the Pacific in things like, how do we handle challenges that are facing our Pacific region? Challenges like economic development, food security, stewardship of our land, taking care of the ocean, resource management, Pacific fisheries, mitigation and adaptation to climate change, sea level rise, demilitarization, and ocean of peace, and so forth.
All of those topics that you just mentioned are a critical and primary element of understanding the Pacific Way, and you said it, how we view and how we do. And so it's important to put the call out to our viewers and to say to them that when we think of Hawaii, when we think of being Hawaiian, we can't just think of ourselves either as isolated and so special. I'm sure you must notice this, where the sentiments of being Hawaiian is so special. There's nobody like us in the world. That's not quite accurate.
Mm-hmm.
We are in that way when it comes to the relevancy next to the United States of America. We're unique and we hold our own, but we're part of the Pacific Ocean, the Moana Nui a Akea, and our Pacific people span thousands of miles across the ocean. So when we say the Pacific Way, it requires us to not orient ourselves so much to the continental United States. We must be oriented to Hawaii as the center of our world, but Hawaii as a part of the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
If we can see ourselves as a part of the Pacific, then we can start to embrace solutions to issues and problems that we may have that we share with other jurisdictions within the Great Pacific. And we can see ourselves outside of the framework that has really not only held us back, but it's really taken us so far away from being Pacific Islander. How much do we as Kanaka in the community, as Native Hawaiians, how much do we exert ourselves such that we will demonstrate that this is our home and that we should be not only taking the lead, but that others should be inclined to follow our lead? Because if we're adhering to Hawaiian way or Kanaka way of life, that's adherence to Pacific way of life, which in turn would be far better way of life for living and life in the islands.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that a logical thing?
Yes, very much so.
But the other ethnicities here, and I'm going to speak to this elephant in the room, I can't really be too concerned about who gets offended, but the non-Hawaiians in political power get very afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And it's to my great dismay when I see that too many are so covetous to remain in the places and spaces that they are, that there's always a need to justify and often reconcile that they need their place under the sun. But so many of them come from homelands that their language, their culture, and their history, and their people are still at the top of the food chain. Mm-hmm. But in seeking the place under the sun here, it always tends to come at the expense of pushing Hawaiians further and further out until we're either erased or we're so irrelevant to the discussion that we're simply token mention.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that through our continual speaking to the Pacific Way, hopefully we can reorient our people, challenge the people's thinkings to ground us to Hawaii, the center of the Pacific, and how we see the rest of the world, but according to that kind of orientation.
Yes, yes.
It's critical for our community to really shift the perspective. Kanaka, Kama'aina, Malihini, Haole alike.
Mm-hmm.
Hawaii has got to be our piko, it's got to be our motherland, our mainland. Our resources, our issues, and our solutions must be based and centered here to Hawaii and the Pacific.
Hi.
And like you said, we must be dignified and respectful and gracious at the same time.
You're watching Free Hawaii News, giving you the Kanaka perspective on issues in Hawaii.
Some of Maui's richest property owners are paying much less for water than everyone else by taking advantage of privately owned water systems built during the plantation era in Hawaii. The price disparities are one problem, but chronic water shortages and then fights over water access is forcing Maui County to soon make major decisions as well as taking over private water systems, which deliver most of the water on Maui. To tell us more, we go now to West Maui, where Kekai Keahi is standing by. Kekai is a taro farmer, a Maui community leader, as well as Kia'i, or protector of Maui resources, and a ninth-generation Lahaina resident. Aloha mai kawa e Kekai.
Aloha Hina. Thank you very much for having me.
In addition to Maui County public water systems, Maui also has privately owned water systems. Could you please tell us how that came to be?
Since the arrival of the plantations, these plantations required large amounts of water to grow their crops, mainly sugar and pineapple. These plantations acquired a lot of the lands and the streams that fed into the lands for their agriculture ventures. These plantations were very efficient in diverting a lot of these streams to use to their benefit. Today, what we see now is a privatization of these streams, and instead of being utilized for crops, it's being utilized for hotels, resorts, high-end development. And what we see now today is almost 80% of Maui's water resources controlled by private purveyors, leaving only about 20% for the at-large community.
Have they been hoarding water?
In the past, they did hoard water even when they had an excess amount and did not let it come down to a lot of the taro farmers and others in the valleys.
Could you give us an idea of how much less that wealthy residents pay for their water compared to everyone else in West Maui?
They were paying anywhere between 50 to 65% less per 1,000 gallons of water. This is hard to accept, being that the county, who supplies the majority of the people that live in on the west side, we pay a larger amount of water, amount per 1,000 gallons. But for these companies who control the vast majority of our water resources, such as 75 to 80% of our water resource, they still are allowed to charge a 65% less than what we have to pay for.
How do water shortages affect Maui's farmers and resident households?
We see a situation where a lot of our farmers and lo'ikalo farmers who have to endure harsh conditions during water shortages that may lessen their ability to produce crops that will be viable for them to survive on. I believe up in Kula, which the water is controlled by East Maui Irrigation, East Maui Irrigation pulls almost 150 million gallons from East Maui. And there are farmers and even homes that's been built in Kula that have been waiting for water meters for over 30 years. And so we feel that diversified farming is a key to helping us sustain ourselves and not be so dependent on what's being imported. And it seems like the system in place keeps us dependent because we cannot get access to some of these resources, especially water, that can help us produce farms on a mom and pop level rather than on a huge mahi pono type venture. And I believe it's just the mom and pop type farms that will eventually, if they have the water resource, that will sustain us.
No leila, mahalo anu ia oe ke kai ke ka ana mai ko mau manao, mahalo anu ko o kai ka me ko ho kupa'a, mahalo anu ka mau hana mai kai. To tell us more, we go now to Maui, where Lance Collins is standing by. Lance Collins is a Maui attorney in Makawao who has represented several West Maui residents and farmers in court for their water rights. Aloha mai kawa e Lance.
Aloha, Hina. Thank you very much for having me today.
Wealthy property owners with sprawling estates in places like Launiupoko, Oloalu, and Ka'anapali, as well as tourist resorts, are the ones who are paying much less for their water than everyone else. Correct?
Yes, that is in fact the case, that many of these private water systems, they are undercapitalized. They do not do the kinds of maintenance that would be required of, let's say, a municipal water system. And it just happens to be a lot cheaper for these legacy systems that don't have to invest in, significant capital up front for infrastructure to convey water to luxury developments. And so many of the developments that were done by West Maui Land south of Kaula Stream, but also Kaanapali Land Management and Maui Land and Pine up in the north, have been able to provide very cheap water, both potable and irrigation water, to these luxury developments for a lot less than what the consumers that are hooked up to the county system have to pay for the same kind of water.
So while there's water shortages for most West Maui residents, there's never any shortages for the wealthy landowners or the tourist resorts. Correct?
Folks who have more money are able to use different aspects of these plantation legacy systems to have uninterrupted sources of water that the rest of us don't have access to.
Is it true that some Maui residents and farmers actually had to go to court to attempt to get access to more water for their crops and families?
Yes. Taro farmers in particular in East Maui have been in court for decades and in multiple lawsuits, both in front of the Commission on Water Resource Management, in front of the Board of Land and Natural Resources. There's basically been endless litigation regarding the East Maui irrigation, because one of the problems with the East Maui irrigation setup is that by taking all of the water out of all of these watersheds, there's no in-stream water that taro farmers that are farther, closer to the shoreline than the diversions are able to have to grow their taro and other crops. So the problem has been for them is to get enough water back in the stream. And it's not just a matter of, I think people don't understand that there's a whole complex science behind growing taro. So you can't just have any kind of water put into your lo'i. It has to be at a certain temperature, because if the temperature is too high, taro will rot. It has to occur at a certain speed. I mean, there's all of these factors that go into it. And if you remove all the water from the stream, or almost all of it, you end up having stagnant hot water, which is not good for taro growing. So folks in East Maui have been the taro farmers have been litigating that for decades. And I think a number of them have actually passed away in this litigation, and then their children just basically take up the reins and continue.
Does the Maui County government have any plan to correct these water problems?
When I was the chair of the last Maui Charter Review Commission, we did put a proposal that the voters adopted, which was to allow the county to establish water authorities over water areas. And so the one that's been established is for East Maui. That one is the East Maui water issues are the ones that are the most developed and the most sort of far along in terms of the county being able to take action. So that's one thing that the county and the voters in particular have already started doing. I also know that there are talks from Mayor Bisson that I've heard about the county actually acquiring or taking over all of the private water systems that exist. And so that all water is handled through the county. And one of the benefits for that, maybe people are like, oh, great, well, we need more government. But actually, one of the benefits of that is that it allows there to be a more equitable rate structure. And it allows basically people who have been underpaying for their water transmission to pay more to help make the system as a whole more resilient and more able to get water to the right places and to make sure that everybody gets their, it makes it easier to make sure that everybody gets their fair share. And not just that, but that control of water is subject to basically working people being able to decide how it goes. Because if the county government is the one that's in charge of it, then it's subject to, the ballot box. It's subject to people who vote. Whereas when, certain parts of the water system are privatized, it's not under the the people don't have any say over it. And so that's all I know. I don't know the details of what the mayor exactly is proposing, but I do know it's been mentioned publicly that the idea is for the county to basically take over all the private water systems so that there can be a uniform and equitable way of managing the transmission of water in Maui.
The United States' claim to the Hawaiian Islands is the result of a series of unlawful acts, manipulations, and falsifications extending over the past 132 years. The United States has formally admitted to and apologized for the wrongful taking of Hawaii, yet no effort to respond to the Hawaiian people's demand for the return of their country. They don't seem to be worried at all about challenges to their past wrongful acts against Hawaii, even though they acknowledge they were wrong. Why have we not been able to dislodge the United States' claim of jurisdiction and dominion over the Hawaiian Islands? In 2010, I led a delegation to attend a United Nations Human Rights Council session in Geneva. The USA was undergoing a universal periodic review of its human rights policies and record. Prior to the official review, the U.S. held a side event to answer questions posed by non-governmental organizations. A member of our Hawaii delegation, our dear friend and indomitable patriot, Waianae attorney Poka Lainui, asked the United States attorney, quote, "By what lawful means did the U.S. acquire the Hawaiian Islands?" Unquote. The U.S. attorney was caught off guard and somewhat flustered by the question, but after an awkward moment, he blurted out, "This is not a legal question, this is a political question, and the political question has been settled." Then he quickly moved on to the next question. Now, what did he mean? It's not a legal question. What did he mean? This is a political question. And what did he mean by the political question has been settled? The U.S. attorney actually gave us a valuable clue as to why the U.S. is not worried about our independence movement and feels no compelling reason to release the grasp of the Hawaiian Islands. The writer Thomas Pynchon once said, "If you can get them to ask the wrong question, you don't have to worry about the answer." We have been asking the wrong question. We have been asking the legal question instead of the political question. So what's the difference? A legal question is addressed when a dispute is brought before a judge or a jury or a tribunal or a panel who, upon hearing the legal arguments, makes a decision according to whether a law or laws were broken or not. Thus, a legal judgment is based on laws currently on the books. Courts do not make laws, they simply interpret the application of the laws. So, where do the laws come from? Aha! You often hear legislators referred to as lawmakers. And where do those lawmakers come from? In a democratic society, they are elected by the people to make or change the laws. So ultimately, the laws come from a political process of the people. So when the U.S. attorney said in Geneva, "This is not a legal question, this is a political question, and the political question has been settled," he was saying there is currently no law against Hawaii being a state of the U.S. And if we want any kind of change, it has to be done through a political process. A new set of laws needs to be made to change the existing ones, and that can only happen through a political process. But wait, wasn't the overthrow illegal? Wasn't annexation unconstitutional? Aren't we under an illegal occupation? Yes, according to the laws and treaties existing at the time. But through a political process by a vote of the people of Hawaii in 1959, the law was changed so that the U.S. presence in Hawaii was deemed as legal. Yes, the 1959 statehood plebiscite, purportedly by the consent of the people, a political decision, changed the legal status of the Hawaiian Islands to a state of the United States. That meant legal questions of prior wrongful acts like the overthrow and annexation were no longer legal questions. This is why every effort Hawaiians have made to sue the United States or the state of Hawaii, citing the illegality of the overthrow, the annexation, the acquisition of lands, etc., have been rebuffed and dismissed. Yes, we can point to, and we have, the fraud involved in how the statehood plebiscite was conducted, but the United States very cleverly used the United Nations to rubber stamp certification of the vote and to officially reclassify Hawaii from a territory eligible for independence to a state of the United States. So, for all intents and purposes, it looks like case closed. But a law created by a political act can be undone by another political act. It would be very difficult to politically flip what the U.S. did with their fraudulent statehood plebiscite, but it is possible to invalidate the certification provided by the United Nations. Much of our efforts over the past 20 years has been focused on raising international awareness and support to right the injustice of the United States' prolonged occupation of our homelands. As a result, there have been many stories about Hawaii's struggle for independence published in diplomatic journals and international magazines and newspapers. When I first started meeting with diplomats at the UN and telling them our story, they would say, "That's a very hard situation. Good luck." 5 or so years later, as we were still advocating for a free Hawaii, they began to say, "Do you really think it could happen?" Then about 5 years ago, as we continued our advocacy, these diplomats and other UN actors began to say, "How do you think we can help?" So it's changed all the way from good luck to how can we help. So together we have figured out a way that UN member states can help us with minimal exposure to retaliation by the United States. The strategy is to recruit a few UN member states, beginning with Pacific Island nations, to submit a resolution to the UN General Assembly calling for a review of the procedures that led to the 1959 adoption of the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 1469. It has been a long slog, but we have managed to get our message heard well enough that we are on the verge of securing several small countries to introduce a resolution calling for the review. It is our expectation that a review of how the plebiscite was conducted will reveal fraud and that the General Assembly made an error in its adoption of Resolution 1469. Thus, the UN would be obligated to rescind the resolution, which would, in turn, nullify the United States' claim that Hawaii is a state of the United States, and it would invalidate its claim of dominion over the Hawaiian Islands. This will also open up all the legal questions as the U.S. would become liable in all the courts. Does this mean we have another plebiscite or referendum to determine what form of government we want for Hawaii? No. At the same time the United States claim is nullified by default, the Hawaiian Kingdom is reinstated as the lawful government for the Hawaiian Islands. At that point, international mechanisms kick in to assure a smooth and peaceful transition from U.S. control to self-government. I report on this because the wheels are in motion and the return of the Hawaiian Kingdom is closer than you think.
Next on Free Hawaii News, Kumu Hina's Mana'o.
Here in Kumu Hina's Mana'o this evening, I challenge each and every one of you to think about people can be of the blood, and people of the blood might have great cultural knowledge, great capacity, and great ability to understand our culture, great ability to know our history, our language, and everything that they could possibly know about being Kanaka. And then there's also the more harsh realities that we can have many of us who are of the blood but don't know much of anything about Hawaiian history or our language. My parents, my grandparents, they were not able to speak Hawaiian, and it's because my great-grandparents' age were of that time, of that era, where being Hawaiian was bad and speaking in our language was banned. So for all of you out there tuning in, just know that it's not necessarily our fault, and it's not necessarily the bad thing that we can't always muster that wherewithal. We're not always of the capacity. But when it comes to being of the blood, it's only a portion of what makes us Kanaka. There are people who are not of the blood, but yet perhaps they were born and raised here in the islands. They may have been raised up in families that were Hawaiian, and their mannerisms, the way they think, the way they feel, and the way they act may be quite representative of that which we, whom our understanding of what this means to be Hawaiian, they might be in great alignment with this. But that brings us to the understanding that, again, it's not just the kulana of being ethnically something. It's not just the kulana of being that person, but not having the kuleana, which is defined by sometimes language, sometimes history, and to understand the worldview and the perspectives that reflect a Hawaiian identity, Hawaiian sense of place, and Hawaiian sense of understanding. So again, for all of you who are tuning in, I thank each and every one of you for allowing me to push the bar on this. And of course, I don't mean to offend folks out there who are tuning in, but again, especially I speak to you, all of my fellow Kanaka. If you are Kanaka and there's resonance within you that says, I am a proud Hawaiian, I challenge you to take that next step and to take yourself to the next level of can or hiki-no, whether it be learning one Hawaiian language word a day, whether it be reading something more to strengthen your fortitude and your understanding, your knowledge base about Hawaiian history and the path that we have come as a people. And I challenge you to avail yourselves to not only being of the blood, not only holding that kulana as a Hawaiian, but to gaining the insight and the knowledge that will help you to define and to articulate what are the responsibilities, what are the duties, and what are the obligations of being Kanaka, to be Hawaiian. Think about this, everyone. For too long, we have succumbed to what the world of the West would impose on us, especially with the understanding of blood quantum. And blood quantum, while it's been used to divide us, it's been used to define us, it's been used to do everything but bring us together as a people. In 2025, can we really afford to be focused only on things like being of the blood and being of a particular blood quantum? There's much to be said for the kulana that we hold as ethnic Hawaiians, but there's so much more to be said for that which we know that strengthens and empowers and uplifts us to think, to act, to feel, and to behave in the manner that our ancestors would be proud of. So with that, mahalo anu ia o kou e na Hawaii, e na Kanaka na Kamaaina na malihini kekahi, ho mana o hoi kākou, o waila kākou, ina o oe Kanaka, a e no o haku. O ko ukulana he Kanaka Hawaii. Ko ukulana he Kanaka o ka pai aina nei, ko ukulana he lala no wau o ka lahu i aloha. No o aku, he hala ka umau kuleana, he hala ka umau mea e hana kuai, a i nā kākou e kuli e ka nuu, aua mo ko kākou kuleana, pēlā no i kākou e hiki a kuai ma kahi pai o maikai a kulana Hawaii. E kia naina e ka lahui, mahalo anui ko o koho manawa nui, mahalo anui ko o nene ana mai.
Mahalo for joining us for this episode of Free Hawaii News. We want to thank all of you for listening in and for viewing our show. And we also want to thank all of our guests for sharing their mana'o with us.
No leila e kia naina o ko e kipa mai nei, mahalo anui ke iuhui ana, a hui ho.
Aloha.
We hope you enjoyed this month's episode of Free Hawaii News. Mahalo for watching. There's a new show every month, so this program will air several more times this month. You can view it anytime on Olelo's on-demand site or on YouTube. See you next time. Ahui ho, aloha aina.
Free Hawaii Broadcasting Network.